Okie dokie. Well, good shows, and here we go. Let's have a chit chat with the boss and see if we can get ourselves together and lined up with his spirit. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the opportunity to study your word. We ask that you'll open our eyes and open our ears, open our hearts, so that we can see, hear, and understand what your word has to tell us. And that we can understand from your instruction how to improve ourselves and be much better for your service as well as for the service of those around us. So we thank you for it all in the name of Yeshua. Amen. All right, well, we're in Parashah Yitro. It's the 18th chapter of Shemot. This parasha has a lot of things to say. So, I took a look at the first few verses, and it applies to a lot. It applies to us every day. Things that we do in our everyday life. You know, we want to strive to be the best that we can be at what we do. We want to strive to live the best that we can live. So we're going to call this seeking excellence over strife. And there's a whole lot to be said in these verses. And we could probably, fortunately, we'll come back to Yitro again next year and the year after and the year after, so we can pick up on everything. So we've been talking about the commandments. We've been talking about the instruction of Elohim. We've been talking about what happened during the flood, why things went south. And to look at this and to kind of get an idea of where we are in what we do and how we apply what we do to our lives and how it affects those around us, we're going to get some ideas as to this within these few verses. We start in verse 1. Simply says, "Now Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that Elohim had done for Moses and for Israel his people, how that Yahuwah had brought Israel out of Egypt." So in the story, we read about how Jethro is visiting Moses, and after hearing everything that Elohim's done for Moses, how he brought him out of Egypt and all the plagues, and he's heard all these things. So what can we take out of this to give us a little guidance in our lives? Now, we have a whole lot of Torah, and we've said that every verse, every word, every letter means something to us. How can this simple introduction give us something that we can take with us? So let's consider the names in this verse so we can start to formulate an idea. Jethro means, or Yitro, Jethro, means his abundance. But it also means excess. And it also means excellence. Midian, well, it means strife or contention. In the word Cohen, we have a word that means priest, but it also means minister. It also means one who teaches. So we can bring together right now, just on these few words, two trains of thought to get us started. The first train of thought is excellence can minister to strife while teaching us what not to repeat. What does that mean? Wow. It means that we do something, we make a mistake, we learn from the mistake, we don't do it again, and what does that do? It helps us to move forward towards excellence. It helps us to move forward towards being very good at what we do. But the other train of thought, excess can also minister to us, bringing into our lives strife and contention. Paul says that Satan can transform himself into a minister of light. What does this mean? Excess can minister to us. We get stuck in this idea that more is better. We get stuck in this idea that we have to keep up with the Joneses. We get stuck in this idea that everybody at work has got the new whatever it is that's new today, and I've still got yesterday's. And not having the new one is making me feel inferior. What does Satan do? He waves fancy things in front of us, and he gets us all bent out of shape because we don't have it. When we don't realize that we could probably do more with a Webster's dictionary that we have to open than to have the next greatest iPad, iPhone thingy doohickey with all the apps on it that can take us anywhere we want to go. But we can be just as successful with a Webster's dictionary to bring forth excellence. So excess can actually have a negative effect if we will allow it. What we do or have done can influence both of these ideas in saying, and this is something, it's kind of corny, but it's important. We can say, I am what I am. This is how I see myself. Do I see myself as being more prosperous than I am? I can see myself as being extremely good at what I do when everybody else sees me as simply being mediocre. The next one is, I do what I do, because this is how others perceive me. This is how others formulate an opinion of what I am. And both of these result in a state of, it is what it is. This is my state of being, and this state of being is set. So, having said that, whether I pursue excellence for the sake of being better in my relationships with those around me, being better at my job, having a better relationship with my Elohim, having a better relationship with my family, or do others see me as simply pursuing excellence to be better than everybody else, and they see that as me having an excessive attitude about being the best and being overly competitive? We have to be competitive, but we don't have to be competitive to where we're stepping on people, because that begins to formulate and people see us as something other than excellent. So, where I may consider my situation as being one of excellence, it may be seen as one of excess. What can cause this in life? We look at verse 2. It says, and Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her away. Okay, well, how can that affect me? You know, but we go back and say that every verse means something. Everything has something to tell us. As a story, we read that Jethro brought Zipporah back to Moses after Moses had left her behind. And he didn't want Zipporah to go with him. He had to go into Egypt and do all this plague stuff, and he had to run away from Pharaoh and cross through the ocean. He didn't want the missus with him. He didn't want to take the kids. You know, some things you got to do by yourself. The word of interest here is vayakach, means and took. It comes from the root lakach, meaning to take, as well as to take away. It was Zipporah, Moses' wife, that was being taken. So what does that mean? Zipporah means bird, but it comes from a root zafar that means doubt. Naishet is a word for wife, comes from the word isha. And in our discussions, we've talked about the difference between ish and isha, that in ish we see the physical hands-on properties of worship, praying, studying, praising, having a physical as we can relationship with Elohim. But in Isha, we see the spiritual side that comes from that worship. So when we look at wife or we look at woman, we give an idea in Isha that we're looking at something that has to do with our spirit. And when we look at this in our discussions, we've considered this spiritual state of being. So what's being affected? We can again formulate two avenues of thought. Excellence can either restore a spiritual well-being, or it can bring us a dubious well-being, in other words, a false sense of security. How many people, I know when I was a supervisor, I would hear the younger guys say, I'm really good at what I do, you know, they're not going to get rid of me, I'm valuable to the company. The fact of the matter is that everybody is expendable. Nobody's worth that much. So do we get a false sense of self-worth when we say, I'm excellent? Or the other side of the story is that excellence can either restore a spiritual well-being or bring a dubious well-being. The other side of it is that we have to be excellent in humility. If I'm good at what I do, I'm going to do it to the best of my ability for the sake of those around me. And I'm not going to say another word, because to be humble is to walk with Elohim. Everybody with me on that one? Okay. The other train of thought is excess can minimalize, small as a bird, our spiritual state, that we discarded it in the first place in our quest for excellence. He did what? He left Zipporah behind. And excellence did what? The word was what? It was lakach, which means excellence took it away. Our quest for excellence can cause our spiritual identity to be taken away. We can, and it'll bring forth doubt into anything that has to do with a relationship with Elohim. We've seen this happen. I've seen it happen to some minister friends of mine years ago that were involved in ministry. One of them pastored a church, but he got to a point where he didn't believe anything that he was doing because he had lost his focus and he had lost his vision. Now, it's not in the notes, but it also says in verse 3 that Jethro came with Zipporah and her 2 sons, of one whose name was Gershom, for he says, I've been a stranger in the land. And the name of the other in verse 4 was Eliezer, for the Elohim of my father was my help, and he delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Something else that we have to consider in this is that we can actually exile ourselves from other people and those around us. Gershom means to exile, but it also means to put off and cast away. So we can exile ourselves, but we put off and cast away all those around us that want to do what? Well, Eliezer means El is help. It means to surround with protection or aid. So what do we get from these 2 verses? That if we have a false sense of excellence, we have a superiority complex. Enough, Jethro also means superiority. But if we have this superiority complex, what happens? We alienate people around us because I don't want to be around that person. They think they're, all that in a bag of potato chips. So I'm going to withdraw. And when they withdraw, we're left by ourselves because all that help that was around us withdraws. But also when we start to push Elohim away and walk based on our own strength and ability, that protection, that aid that comes from Elohim also has a tendency to back off, so that we're left by ourselves saying, Elohim says, yeah, okay. You think you can do this by yourself? I'm going to let you do this by yourself. So we consider that. And we can actually go on to verse 6 and look at that, that Jethro says to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and your 2 sons with her. That if we get our head together, and if we come to the realization that I'm really not all that in a bag of potato chips, that excellence can start to bring all these things back into our lives and can actually restore our lives. The things that we've put off come back. The protection that we had around us from Elohim comes back. The help that we had from those around us comes back because, wow, you're not that smarty aleck that was so difficult to work with. You're humble, and we're going to come back. And we see this in verse 5 that says, and Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife into Moses into the wilderness where he was encamped at the Mount of Elohim. We've talked about wilderness. The word is Bamidbar. That comes from the root davar, which means word, instruction, promise. That when we allow excellence, when we allow our abundance to get refocused back into the word, that's when restoration starts to take place. You know, we've seen from the last 3 Tuesday Torah studies that the commandments don't simply deal with what we do when we're in service, that they deal with every aspect of our life and everything. It touches everything that we do. So when we allow the word to dictate how we should go, how we should move, then not only are people around us motivated to help us because they see something that they don't see anywhere else in us, but we also have the hand of our Elohim, his truth, power, and the ability of Elohim that's on us, touching us, guiding us, and leading us along the way. So these are some things to consider in, I guess, the first 6 verses. So we go back to verse 1 and consider that Jethro heard. And the word used is Shema, which means to perceive, discern, understand, apply, be content, be content. So we have to learn how to discern and then understand what we are seeking in our quest for excellence and know the difference between it and excellence that is simply empty excess. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to move a whole bunch of verses ahead to verse 21. I say Yitro is huge, and it's a melting pot of a whole bunch of stuff. So we're going to take 2 thoughts and kind of pack them together to get one idea of what it is to allow excellence in our life to help us to overcome strife, problems, contention, but a real excellence. And what we read in verse 21 says, moreover, you shall provide out of all the people able men, such as fear Elohim, men of truth, hating unjust gain, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10. This is Jethro telling Moses. This is excellence speaking. And this is an idea of what comes from excellence is to do these things. So we've read that this is advice given after Jethro saw Moses basically from daylight to sundown. He's sitting there, and all these people are around him, bringing him his problems, and Jethro says, wow, you know, you're going to have a heart attack. You know, you're going to have a stroke right there. The sun's hot. You don't eat right. Look at you. You're getting thin. And he says, you have to do something. And the story says, Jethro says, put people over the other people to help you to judge. So the first 2 requisites that we read about here are men of truth, hating unjust gain. So we have to ask, are my actions or my desire to acquire honest? These are truth. They have impulse aisles at the checkout register. And you look at it and you say, I need that $4.99 widget